Hi. Okay, so we are talking about the science of connection, the connection to one another, person to person, and connection to ourselves. And when we think about connection, we talk about that's really about the science of the brain and the body and the nervous system. So as I've been studying and learning about all of this, the brain is the understanding of the brain has been progressing and or evolving, you could say, the understanding of that really rapidly um, to where now what we are aware of the subject of interpersonal neurobiology, which is really like the science of relationship or connection, is based from Dr. Bruce Perry's work, which has now expanded the understanding of the brain to involve four parts. It used to be understood as three parts, and this is pretty significant, and I'll explain why as we go forward. And also Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel's work. And he's the one that coined the term interpersonal neurobiology with the acronym of IPNB. And that's significant because the the shift to understanding that there's fluid, or even you could call like swirly dynamics, nonlinear dynamics between the brain, the body, and the nervous system is significant because before a while back, the nervous system activation used to be considered as more of like a step-by-step hierarchy. You're either in one type of activation or you're in another, or it switches. And now the understanding is that you can actually be in multiple states at the same time. So the understanding of the brain, the body, and the nervous system is that they are all connected. You can picture, right, that we have a brain in here, and then the nervous system, we have nerves that literally go all the way out throughout our entire body, down to all of our limbs, our core body. And that means that they're acting together as one. And therefore, what happens here in our thoughts, our cognitions, affects the bodily sensations. And the nervous system, because it can hold multiple activation states simultaneously, it's important to understand this when we're thinking about being connected with another person and even understanding ourselves, because both kind of go hand in hand. And by understanding ourselves and others, that will inevitably improve our connection, to one another and improve relationships. So often we see people, struggle with either anxiety or depression. And those are probably the two most common things that we can understand that people struggle with. And even in ourselves, we might, cluster stress as anxiety, and sadness or overwhelm, after time with depression. And really, we can take those as symbolizations of activation. So, like anxiety could be considered in the sympathetic or the revved up type of activation in our brain and nervous systems and bodies. We feel it bodily. And that's where, when it at its height, we can go into, high levels of anger and rage and dissociation and panic attacks. And those are like the highest level of that, like hypervigilance. And then depression, or like the shut down, we also call that like shut down type of activation. It's almost like there's no activation or little to none. And that is like a frozen type of state. And there can be fear there too, or there just can be disorientation. dissociation as well, like a frozen type of immobilization type of state. So it's important to understand that. And Dan Siegel, who is the author of a lot of like the best-selling books on understanding why therapy works, what the therapeutic, relationship really does for someone, and also parent-child relationships. He and Tina Payne Bryson have written, some of the most updated best-selling books on how to best parent our kids on various different subjects. And it's all based in this neuroscience of relationship. And so Dan Siegel actually defines that all the diagnoses that there are in the world are actually symptoms of what we call a dysregulated nervous system. So that shifts the focus from trying to achieve calm to actually trying to achieve or cultivate what's called integration, which is the ability to stay relationally connected to oneself, or being able to swirl in ventral vagal, which is the state that we all kind of ideally want to be in and what we feel when we are at our best. That's like also called the rest and digest type of state. And so we want to be able to cultivate integration, which is the ability to stay relationally connected to oneself or in some ventral vagal while experiencing some levels of high activation. Just like what I was just describing with being revved up or really shut down, and being in connection with someone who may be in either one of those states or somewhere in between. So in order to even understand what that means, we first need to understand, like, what does regulation mean? Because that's like the term that is being used. It's unanimous with what we all want to have and what we want our children to have and what people want to feel when they are in therapy, or, cultivate more of that by going to therapy, because it's often misunderstood as simply reaching a state of being calm, right? Or like non-anxious or non-depressed. But in this framework, regulation does not mean calming down. Calm is merely like one possible experience within the nervous system. So we're shifting the understanding now. This is some of the fascinating, juicy stuff to know about the neuroscience of relationship and connection, is that regulation actually means modulation, which is a moment of mindful connection, being in the present moment, connection with yourself or attaching to self that allows you to consciously modulate the intensity of your internal state. So whether that means bringing energy up, right? If we are really low and shut down and spaced out, dissociative, depressed, feeling like I can't do it, then we're going to want to bring energy up. But then sometimes we're going to want to bring energy down if we're revved up too much. And it's also being able to learn to sit with high activation in ourself. And what do we do with it? How do we modulate that? How do we either bring it down or bring ourselves up? And so that's also what we're doing in parent-child relationships, and also therapist-client relationships. So some key elements of regulation, just to kind of flesh it out a little bit more, is connection over calming. So the goal is not to eliminate getting dysregulated, because we can't. Life is in session. That once one challenge comes, we want to be able to regulate through that, because the next challenge is going to come. So we can't avoid hard feelings or make challenges vanish. So rather, it's the building of the capacity to stay connected to oneself in the middle of overwhelm, of sadness, when things are happening that are really sad. We can't get ourselves out of that. We can regulate ourselves in the midst of it. We can feel it, and we can have a mindful connection to ourself that allows us to consciously modulate the intensity of that state by being aware of it in the present moment, non-judgmentally, noticing what is, and allow ourselves to move through that, right? We want to feel whatever emotions there are. We want to feel the bodily sensations that are there. Notice it, and that allows us to move through it. And sometimes we might need to put words to that and express it. And sometimes we might need to do something physical to physically move through that. So the understanding now is that you can be in dual or simultaneous states at the same time. You can, in one part of you, feel regulation, and in another part of you, feel dysregulation at the exact same time. So for instance, like a therapist and a client, or a parent and a child, can feel intense sadness or anxiety, right? Because of whatever's going on, whatever the challenge is that's happening, while simultaneously bringing in an internal sense of safety, to ground and stay present with that feeling and that reality. So the relational aspect of this is that true emotional intelligence and resiliency are defined not by never getting dysregulated, but by how quickly you return to connection and how well you can stay attuned to yourself and others through intensity. So it's really about moving toward and not away. So regulation is used to lean into uncomfortable sensations rather than compartmentalizing or fleeing from them, which is also, we know, in attachment is known as avoidance. So that's some understanding of regulation within the nervous system based on the latest neuroscience of connection and relationships. So stay tuned as I continue to build on this lesson from here. And I look forward to hearing your questions and thoughts and how you can use this in your relationships and your work.